Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Once upon a time, in the deep of winter when snowflakes fell like feathers from the sky, a queen sat sewing at an ebony window frame. She pricked her finger with her needle, and 3 drops of blood fell upon the snow. The red looked so beautiful upon the white that she thought to herself, "If only I had a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood of this window frame." Soon after, she gave birth to a little daughter whose skin was white as snow, lips red as blood, and hair black as ebony. They named her Snow White. But the good queen died shortly after. A year passed, and the king took a new wife. She was a beautiful woman, but proud and vain, and could not bear anyone to surpass her in beauty. She possessed a magical mirror, and each day she would stand before it and ask, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?" And the mirror would reply, "You, my queen, are fairest of all." This pleased her, for she knew the mirror spoke only the truth. Snow White grew up, becoming more beautiful with each passing year. By the time she was 7, her beauty was as radiant as the day, far surpassing that of the queen. One day, when the queen asked her mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?" the mirror answered, "You, my queen, are fair, it is true, but Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you." The queen was horrified. Envy and pride grew in her heart like a weed until she had no peace day nor night. She summoned a huntsman and commanded, "Take the child into the deepest woods and kill her. As proof, bring me back her lungs and liver." The huntsman obeyed and led Snow White far into the forest. But as he drew his knife, she wept and begged, "Oh, dear huntsman, spare my life. I will run into the wild forest and never come home." Seeing her innocence, the huntsman took pity. "Run away then, poor child," he said. He killed a young wild boar instead and took its lungs and liver to the queen as proof. The wicked queen had them cooked in salt and ate them, believing she had consumed Snow White's organs. Now the poor child was alone in the vast forest, terrified of every rustling leaf. She began to run, and wild beasts passed by but did her no harm. As evening fell, she saw a little cottage and went inside to rest. Inside, everything was tiny but neat and clean. There was a little table set with 7 little plates, 7 little spoons, 7 little knives and forks, and 7 little cups. Against the wall stood 7 little beds in a row. Snow White, hungry and thirsty, ate a few vegetables and a bit of bread from each plate and drank a drop of wine from each cup. Then, tired from walking, she tried the beds. The first was too long, the next too short, but the 7th was just right. She lay down, said a prayer, and fell asleep. When it was dark, the masters of the cottage returned. They were 7 dwarfs who mined for ore in the mountains. They lit their 7 candles and saw at once that someone had been there. The first said, "Who has been sitting in my chair?" The second, "Who has been eating from my plate?" The third, "Who has taken some of my bread?" The fourth, "Who has eaten my vegetables?" The fifth, "Who has used my fork?" The sixth, "Who has cut with my knife?" The seventh, "Who has been drinking from my cup?" Then the first, looking around, saw a hollow in his bed and cried, "Who has been lying in my bed?" The others came running and each cried out, "Someone has been lying in my bed too." But the 7th dwarf, looking into his bed, saw Snow White fast asleep. He called the others, who came and stared in wonder, holding their candles high. "Good heavens," they whispered, "what a beautiful child!" They were so delighted they let her sleep through the night. In the morning, Snow White awoke and was frightened at first, but the dwarfs were kind. "What is your name?" they asked. "My name is Snow White," she answered. "How did you come to our house?" they asked. She told them her stepmother had tried to have her killed, but the huntsman spared her, and she had run all day until she found their cottage. The dwarfs took counsel. If you will keep house for us, cook, make the beds, wash, sew, and knit, and keep everything neat and clean, you may stay with us, and you shall have everything you need." "Yes, with all my heart," said Snow White. And so she stayed, keeping the cottage in perfect order. In the mornings, the dwarfs went to the mountain to dig for ore. In the evenings, they returned, and their meal had to be ready. All day the girl was alone. "Beware of your stepmother," warned the dwarfs as they left. "She will soon know you are here. Let no one into the house when we are not here." Back at the palace, the queen, believing herself once again the fairest, went to her mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?" To her horror, the mirror replied, "You, my queen, are fair, it is true, but beyond the mountains with the 7 dwarfs, Snow White is still alive and well, and she is 1,000 times fairer than you." The queen knew the huntsman had betrayed her. She resolved to kill Snow White herself. Using her knowledge of witchcraft, she disguised herself as an old peddler woman and crossed the 7 mountains to the dwarf's cottage. Knocking on the door, she called, "Pretty wares for sale, pretty wares." Snow White looked out the window. "Good day, old woman. What do you sell?" "All sorts of pretty things, stay laces of every color." She held up a pair woven from bright silk. "Let me lace you up properly." Snow White, suspecting nothing, opened the door. The queen laced her so tightly with the new stay lace that Snow White's breath was cut off, and she fell down as if dead. "Now I am the fairest," cackled the queen, and she hurried away. When the dwarfs came home that evening, they found Snow White on the floor, no breath in her body. They lifted her, searched for anything poisoned, unlaced her, combed her hair, washed her with water and wine, but nothing helped. The dear child was dead, and she remained dead. They laid her on a bier, and all 7 sat round it and mourned for her for 3 whole days. They could not bury her in the black earth, for she looked so alive, her cheeks still rosy. "We cannot hide her away in the dark ground," they said. So they made a transparent coffin of glass, placed her inside, and wrote her name in gold letters upon it, explaining she was a king's daughter. They set the coffin on the mountain, and one of them always stayed nearby to watch over it. Birds came too, first an owl, then a raven, and lastly a dove, and mourned for Snow White. For a long, long time Snow White lay in the coffin, unchanged. She seemed only to be sleeping, for she was still as white as snow, as red as blood, and her hair black as ebony. It happened that a prince was traveling through the land and came to the dwarf's cottage to spend the night. On the mountain, he saw the glass coffin and beautiful Snow White inside. He read the golden letters and said to the dwarfs, "Let me have the coffin. I will give you whatever you want for it." But the dwarfs answered, "We will not part with it for all the gold in the world." The prince pleaded, "Then give her to me as a gift, for I cannot live without seeing her. I will honor and cherish her as my most treasured possession." The good dwarfs took pity on him and gave him the coffin. The prince ordered his servants to carry it away on their shoulders. As they did, they stumbled over a tree root, and the jolt caused the piece of poisoned apple to dislodge from Snow White's throat. She opened her eyes, lifted the lid of the coffin, and sat up alive once more. "Heavens, where am I?" she cried. Full of joy, the prince exclaimed, "You are with me." He told her what had happened and said, "I love you more than anything in the world. Come with me to my father's castle and be my wife." Snow White agreed, for she saw he was good and kind. Their wedding was planned with great splendor and magnificence. The wicked queen was invited to the feast. Dressing in her finest, she stood before her mirror and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?" The mirror answered, "You, my queen, are fair, it is true, but the young queen is 1,000 times fairer than you." The queen was horrified. At first she did not want to go to the wedding, but she could not rest until she saw the young queen. When she arrived at the castle and recognized Snow White, she stood still with terror and rage. But iron slippers had already been heated over a fire. They were brought in with tongs and set before her. She was forced to step into the red-hot shoes and dance until she fell down dead. But Snow White and the prince lived happily, reigning over their kingdom with justice and kindness for many, many years.